On a clear, moonless night in early May of 2011, history held its breath. In the quiet, unsuspecting city of Abbottabad, Pakistan, in the pre-dawn hours, a small elite group of U.S. Special Operations Forces sliced through the dark skies, their destination a high-walled compound that had, for years, hidden the world's most wanted man. This was not just another military operation. It was the culmination of a decade-long, painstaking intelligence effort that had spanned continents, sifted through mountains of data, and followed the faintest of human trails. The target was Osama bin Laden, the enigmatic leader of Al-Qaeda and the architect of the September 11th attacks, a figure who had become a global symbol of terror and a phantom that had eluded the most powerful manhunt in modern history. The mission, codenamed Operation Neptune Spear, was a high-stakes gamble designed to bring this chapter to a definitive close. The men tasked with this monumental duty were members of the U.S. Naval Special Warfare Development Group, more famously known as SEAL Team 6. They were the tip of a very long spear, honed by years of relentless training and clandestine operations across the globe. For them, this was the ultimate test of their skills, a mission where failure was not an option and the potential consequences were immense, both for their own lives and for the geopolitical landscape. The 40 minutes of action in Abbottabad were preceded by months of agonizing deliberation at the highest levels of the U.S. government. The final decision to launch Operation Neptune Spear rested squarely on the shoulders of the president, Barack Obama. For weeks, he and his national security team had gathered in the Situation Room, a secure, windowless chamber in the West Wing, to debate the intelligence and weigh the risks and rewards. The evidence pointing to bin Laden's presence was strong, built on courier tracking, built on human intelligence. Yet it remained circumstantial. There was no definitive photograph, no voice intercept, no single piece of evidence for certainty. The decision was a calculated risk, a presidential judgment call. The final meeting was tense. Advisors presented options. At approximately 10:30 p.m. local time in Afghanistan, the rotors of two MH-60 Black Hawk helicopters began to spin. Their sounds were muffled by advanced stealth technology designed to reduce acoustic and thermal signatures. This was not a standard flight. It was a clandestine infiltration deep into foreign airspace. The mission had officially begun. The flight from Jalalabad to Abbottabad would take about 90 minutes. It was a period of intense and silent concentration for everyone involved. The pilots, members of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, known as the Night Stalkers. They guided their aircraft with breathtaking skill, flying low and fast, using a technique called terrain hugging to stay below the reach of Pakistani radar systems. The darkness outside was absolute, broken only by the faint glow of the cockpit instruments. Inside the helicopters, 23 Navy SEALs sat in stoic silence. The journey was a final opportunity for mental preparation. They were encased in body armor, weapons, explosives, communication gear. The air was thick with the smell of hydraulic fluid and jet fuel. Just as the lead helicopter positioned itself to hover over the compound's courtyard, designated Chalk 1, positioned itself to hover over the compound's courtyard. The mission's meticulous planning collided with the unpredictable nature of reality. The pilots began experiencing a condition known as a vortex ring state. The high walls of the compound combined with the higher-than-expected air temperature and the helicopter's heavy load created a column of turbulent air that disrupted the rotor's ability to generate lift. The sophisticated aircraft, a marvel of stealth engineering, began to shudder and lose altitude uncontrollably. The pilot fought for control, but the descent was too rapid to arrest. With split-second decision-making, he steered the falling helicopter away from the center of the courtyard to avoid crashing into the main building, bringing it down in a controlled crash into one of the compound's animal pens. The impact was hard, but not catastrophic. The tail rotor and boom clipped one of the high perimeter walls, shattering them, and the main body of the aircraft settled at a sharp angle against the wall. While no one was seriously injured, the plan was instantly and irrevocably altered. With the crash of Chalk 1 having announced their arrival in the most dramatic way possible, the mission transitioned instantly into a ground assault. The SEALs from the downed helicopter moved with disciplined speed, their initial shock channeled into aggressive action. They were now inside the compound's outer defenses, but they still had to breach the buildings within. Simultaneously, the team from Chalk 2, which had landed outside the compound, began their own entry. They used explosive charges to blow through the fortified outer gates and walls, the muffled explosions adding to the growing chaos of the night. Within moments, both teams were inside the perimeter and beginning their systematic clearance of the property. The compound was a labyrinth of buildings and high walls, designed for privacy and security. It consisted of a large 3-story main house, a smaller guest house, and several outbuildings. The SEALs split into teams, each assigned to clear a different section of the property. They moved in practiced formations, communicating with hand signals and terse radio commands, their night vision goggles turning the dark courtyard into a surreal green-hued battlefield. The assault on the main 3-story house was a slow and deliberate vertical climb through mortal danger. After securing the ground floor, women and children who were restrained with plastic cuffs and moved to safety, the SEAL team prepared to ascend to the second level. The staircase was a critical choke point, a classic ambush location. The lead operators moved up the stairs with extreme caution, their weapons trained on the landing above. As they neared the top, they encountered the courier's brother, another armed man who posed a direct threat. A brief, violent exchange of gunfire erupted in the narrow stairwell, and the threat was neutralized, allowing the team to push forward onto the second floor. The second floor presented a similar challenge to the first, a series of rooms that had to be cleared one by one. The SEALs moved in a fluid, coordinated manner. The final moments of the raid unfolded with astonishing speed. As the lead SEAL pushed through the door into the third-floor bedroom, he saw a tall, bearded man in the dim light. The man was Osama bin Laden. He was with one of his wives, who reportedly rushed the assaulter and was shot in the leg and moved aside. Bin Laden was unarmed but near a rifle. He was also near a pistol. He was deemed a threat. The SEAL operator fired. He struck him in the chest. He struck him in the head. The engagement was over in seconds. After nearly 10 years on the run, the leader of Al-Qaeda lay dead on the floor of his secret sanctuary. The call went out over the radio, a simple, coded message to confirm the mission's primary objective had been met: Geronimo Echia. In the Situation Room, a wave of stunned silence was broken by a quiet, "We got him." The years of searching, the months of planning, and the agonizing minutes of the raid had culminated in this one moment. But for the SEALs on the ground, the work was far from over. The mission now entered a new, equally critical phase: positive identification and intelligence collection. One of the SEALs, a tall operator chosen for the task, lay down next to the body to confirm the height. They took photographs of the face. They collected saliva samples. They collected blood samples. They collected bone marrow samples. This was about proving to the world that he was gone. They swept up everything they could find. Computer hard drives. They swept up USB thumb drives. They swept up DVDs. They swept up paper documents. This process, known as sensitive site exploitation, was a key secondary objective of the raid. The materials recovered from the compound held the promise of revealing Al-Qaeda's current operations. They hoped to learn future plans. They sought communication methods. They sought the identities of other key operatives. The SEALs used large bags to collect the trove of digital and paper files, working against the clock as the threat of Pakistani military intervention grew with every passing minute. The body of bin Laden was carefully placed into a body bag. The decision had been made prior to the mission that, if successful, his body would be brought back for final identification and then buried at sea within 24 hours in accordance with Islamic tradition. The flight back to Afghanistan was as tense as the journey in, if not more so. The helicopters were now heavier, carrying the full assault team, carrying the body of their target, carrying a priceless haul of intelligence. They were also loud. They had made their presence known with a crash and an explosion. The pilots of the Chinook, the pilots of the remaining Black Hawk flew low and fast, but this time they knew Pakistani air defenses might be on high alert. Reports said Pakistani F-16s had been scrambled to investigate Abbottabad. A confrontation with the Pakistani Air Force was a real and terrifying possibility. It could turn success into a diplomatic and military catastrophe. Inside the helicopters, the atmosphere was a complex mixture of exhaustion, relief, adrenaline. In the hours following the raid, the world remained oblivious to the historic event that had just transpired. The focus of the U.S. government shifted to absolute confirmation and the careful management of the impending announcement. On board the USS Carl Vinson, the body of Osama bin Laden underwent extensive identification procedures. Facial recognition analysis was conducted. The body's height was measured. Most importantly, DNA samples taken from the body were compared against a known sample from bin Laden's family. The results came back as a near-perfect match. There was no longer any doubt. The man killed in Abbottabad was indeed Osama bin Laden. With confirmation in hand, President Obama prepared to address the nation and the world.
Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda, and a terrorist who's responsible for the murder of thousands of innocent men, women, and children.
The news spread like wildfire across the globe. Spontaneous celebrations erupted outside the White House. Spontaneous celebrations erupted at Ground Zero in New York City, a cathartic release of a decade's worth of grief and anger. The hunt that began in the smoking ruins of the World Trade Center was finally over. The impact of the raid was immediate and profound. For the United States and its allies, it was a major strategic and symbolic victory. It demonstrated the long reach and unwavering resolve of American intelligence and military power. The death of bin Laden decapitated Al-Qaeda, throwing the organization into disarray and severely diminishing its inspirational power. For the families of the victims of 9/11 and other Al-Qaeda attacks, the news brought a sense of justice and closure, even if it could not erase their pain. The intelligence gathered from the compound proved to be the largest terrorist intelligence haul ever collected, providing invaluable insights into Al-Qaeda's network and operations for years to come. However, the raid also raised complex and challenging questions. It strained the already fragile relationship between the United States and Pakistan, which was embarrassed and angered by the unilateral American operation on its soil. The legality and ethics of the mission were debated globally, touching on issues of national sovereignty, targeted killings, and the rules of war in the modern age. While the death of bin Laden marked the end of a chapter, it did not end the threat of global terrorism. New leaders, new groups would emerge from the ashes. The stakes could not have been higher. For the men on the helicopters, every tick of the clock brought them closer to a moment of intense danger and historical significance. For the leaders watching from thousands of miles away in the White House Situation Room, it was a period of agonizing suspense, a test of their resolve and the intelligence they had so carefully gathered. The mission was more than a military strike. It was a deeply personal quest for justice for the thousands of lives lost on 9/11 and a strategic necessity to decapitate a resilient and adaptive terrorist network. The story of that night is a story of precision, risk, and the profound weight of a single decision that would echo around the world for years to come. The image that accompanies this is a satellite image showing the layout of the large, high-walled compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. Advisors presented options: a precision airstrike, a joint operation with Pakistani forces. An airstrike with B-2 bombers would be less risky for U.S. personnel but would pulverize the compound, make identification impossible, and likely cause major collateral damage to nearby homes. A joint operation with Pakistan was deemed too risky because leaks could compromise secrecy. The SEAL raid was the most precise option allowed for positive identification recovery of valuable intelligence, but was the most dangerous. Two specially modified Black Hawk helicopters would carry the assault team from a forward operating base in Afghanistan deep into sovereign Pakistani territory, an act fraught with diplomatic and military peril. Their objective was to land, assault the compound, confirm bin Laden's presence, and get out before the world, or Pakistan's military, knew what was happening. This essay seeks to deconstruct the 40 minutes that unfolded on the ground, providing a clear and detailed timeline of the raid on the Abbottabad compound. It will follow the operators from the moment the order was given to the tense flight back to safety, examining the critical decisions, the unexpected complications, and the human element that defined this historic event. The language will remain straightforward and the focus neutral, aiming to explain precisely what transpired without glorifying the inherent violence of the act. The narrative will draw upon established public records and first-hand accounts to piece together the sequence of events that not only ended a long and painful pursuit, but also irrevocably altered the course of the global fight against terrorism, leaving behind a legacy that continues to be debated and analyzed to this day. The stakes could not have been higher. Quiet professionalism took over, masking adrenaline, focus, and the quiet acknowledgement of danger a short flight away. The first resistance came from the guest house near the entrance of the compound. As one team approached, a man emerged with a weapon. This was Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti, the courier whose movements had led the CIA to this very location. He was identified as a hostile and was engaged by the SEALs. The firefight was short and brutally efficient. Inside the guest house, the SEALs also encountered and neutralized al-Kuwaiti's wife when she reportedly moved towards a weapon. The operators moved with a focused intensity, their actions dictated by strict rules of engagement designed to minimize harm to civilians while eliminating any perceived threat to the mission or their lives. As the guest house was secured, other teams moved towards the main building, the structure where intelligence suggested bin Laden himself was living. They used explosive charges to breach the ground floor doors, the force of the blasts shaking the building. Inside, they found a disorienting maze of rooms and makeshift walls, a deliberate design to confuse any intruders. The SEALs began the painstaking process of clearing the ground floor, moving from room to room, shouting commands in Arabic and Pashto for occupants to surrender. The tension was immense. Behind every closed door could be the primary target. The call for extraction marked the beginning of the end of the ground operation. The SEALs began a coordinated withdrawal from the main house, moving with the same discipline they had shown upon entry. They consolidated at the center of the compound, bringing with them the body of bin Laden, the vast collection of intelligence materials, and the women and children who had been detained during the assault. The non-combatants were left in a secure area of the courtyard with plastic cuffs to be found by Pakistani authorities later. The team's priority was a clean and swift departure. The clock was their biggest enemy now, as the likelihood of a Pakistani response increased with every moment they remained on sovereign soil. A major task remained: the destruction of the downed Black Hawk helicopter Chalk 1. Leaving it behind was not an option. The aircraft contained highly classified stealth technology, avionics communications equipment that could not be allowed to fall into foreign hands. Once the SEALs were safely aboard the extraction aircraft, the order was given to detonate the charges on the downed helicopter. A bright flash illuminated the compound,